So basically, math operators allow us to calculate mathematical equations and calculate by adding, dividing, multiplying, and subtracting. And we can do many other things with mathematical operators as well. And this is basically an easy way for us to calculate values within our program. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to come back up here to the top to our main method. And within our main method, I'm going to define a new method right here. So I'm going to call this method math operators. Close that out. And again, we don't have this method yet. That's why we have this error. So I'm just going to copy its name. I'm going to go right back down here. I'm going to define a new static void method. And it's again void because we don't need to return anything. And we're going to call that math operators. Okay. So what we want to do is we want to be able to cover all of the major mathematical operations that exist. So that you'll be able to work easily with numbers within these programs. So the very first thing we'll do here is let's define a couple of numbers here. So let's define a num1 variable. And in num1, we're going to set that to 10. Then let's define a second number variable, and we'll set that to 5. And in here, what we want to do is we want to first do the addition. So I guess we can create another variable called addition, and we're going to set that addition to num1 plus num2 and semicolon. And let's just output that and see what we get. So console, console, spelling that, dot right line, and we're just going to output the addition value. So when I save that and I run it, as you see below, it's taking a while, sorry. There we go, 15. So we get the value of 15 because we're adding 10 and 5 together. So that's addition, it's that simple. So what I would say, guys, is as we go through these examples, feel free to stop the video and try it yourself before we continue. So that way you can kind of figure things out on your own and learn how to problem solve. So the very second thing we'll define here is we're going to subtract numbers. So let's do that. Let's say int subtraction is equal to, and we'll make it nice and simple, num1 minus num2. So with that being said, guys, what is the answer going to be here? So pause the video if you want to and give it a shot yourself. Okay, so now we're subtracting num1 and num2. So let's just output what that is. So we're just going to output here subtraction, and we're going to run this. And you see that the value is 5. Now, I want to show something. What if, for example, we said that num1 is 5 and num2 is 10? So now we're subtracting 10 from 5. So if I rerun this, you're going to see that the output now is -5, making this integer signed because it represents a negative value. So just keep that in mind. We're also able to get negative values as well. So I'm just going to set that back to 10 and 5 to make things simple so you guys can follow along more easily. Cool. So now the next operation we want to show is multiplication, of course. So multiplication. I hope I spelled that correctly. Multiplication. Yep. So we're going to say num1, and to multiply, we need to just the asterisk key. So num1, num2, like that. And let's just output that as console.writeLine. And we're just going to do multiplication. Save that and run. So now we're expecting 50 and we got it. Okay, so 10 times 5 is 50. And lastly, we're going to do division. So let's do int division is equal to num1. And to represent dividing or division, we're just going to use a / num2. And let's just output that console writeLine division. And let's run this and see what we get. So we get 2. Now, what happens, and kind of going back to the example I had before, what happens, let's say, if this were 5 and this were 10? Let's see what would happen in the case of division. So I'm going to run this. And as you guys see, the answer is 0. If you guys remember back to grade school math or high school math even, when you divide by this number, you're basically going to get 0. in this case, right? But there is a way for us to represent remainders in C sharp. So I'm going to do that right now. But just keep in mind when you divide a number like that, that basically if you divide 5 into 10, or rather 10 into 5, you're going to get 0, because obviously you're dividing the bigger number from the smaller number. So just keep that in mind, guys. There's also something called the divide by 0 exception, or it's an error called divide by 0. That's something you have to look out for when you're writing code, and you need to handle that situation properly. So that normally happens, for instance, if you're dividing 10 by 0. Basically, if you don't handle that error properly, it'll stop the execution of your program, which is not a good thing, especially if you're running in a live environment. I'm going to show you guys later how to handle that particular case once we get to exception handling. So far I've shown you guys how to add, multiply, divide, and subtract. But one thing I want to also show you guys is basically how to get the remainder from a division. So for example, let's say we want to divide 11 into 5, but we don't want to, or rather 5 into 11, but we don't really care about what the quotient is. We care about what the remainder is. So there is something called modulus. So I'm going to define int modulus, and that's going to be equal to num. Let's change these numbers. Let's define some new numbers here, or actually we'll just write it in line. Let's just say 11, and to represent modulus, you use a percentage sign, and let's just use 5. So what do you guys think this result is going to be? Let's output it and see what we get. So we do console.writeLine, and we'll say modulus. So let's run that. And as you guys see below, the output is 1. Why is that? Well, that's because if you divided 5 into 11, you're left with a remainder of 1, because 5 goes into 10 2 times, and then you have 1 to carry over. So that's the reason why. So you generally would use modulus for things like if you want to figure out odd numbers versus even numbers, you want to find out how much is left over after a certain division operation has been run, and so on. So there's many different use cases, and it's a very helpful thing to use.